My name is Alex, and this happened in the winter of 2019. I was 29 and working the evening front desk at a public high school while taking night classes to finish a degree in education leadership. I had been covering evenings for the registrar for 3 months, a job that paid the bills and kept my feet warm in a building that smelled often of dust, disinfectant, and the lingering fried smell from the cafeteria. It was a Tuesday, the kind of night when the heat hummed loud, the fluorescent lights buzzed, and the corridors had that damp echo of distant lockers slamming. I remember the exact time because I checked the wall clock when I signed the logbook, 7:48 p.m. I remember the sound of the old scanner at the entry as students scanned their IDs to leave, and the way the metal of the door handle felt cold under my palm. I thought it would be a normal night until the first strange thing happened, and then everything accelerated in a way I could not stop. The first contact was small and casual enough on the surface. I saw him in the main corridor near the library a little after 8. He looked like a student at a glance, a hoodie, a backpack with a frayed patch of a band logo, scuffed sneakers. He had a blank ID card clipped to his chest, but when he walked toward the office, his steps sounded too steady, as if practiced. I called out, "Hey, you need to check in with the front desk." He looked up and smiled in that way that tries to look ordinary. "I am supposed to meet someone," he said. "Name is Carter. He said to tell you about the group project and that my badge would be handled by the teacher." I scanned the office shelves for the teacher's name that matched the class roster, and nothing matched Carter as a student. My stomach prickled. I asked him to wait and went to the office computer to check the enrollment list, the scanner, the stamped attendance sheets, the tracking code we used for temporary badges. There was no Carter. I told him, "We don't have a Carter on file. You have to wait here while I call campus security." He shrugged with a practiced grin and leaned against the corridor bench in a way that looked too relaxed for someone who was not supposed to be there. The way the fluorescent lights reflected off the laminate floor made his shadow stretch long and thin. I could smell someone near him had been smoking menthol, and the air had that metallic tang of stale coffee. The hall's sound was the muffled beat of the janitor's radio from the other wing and the occasional creak of the heating vents. I pressed the panic button under the desk with my thumb for a brief second to alert campus security without announcing out loud that I was suspicious. 25 seconds later, a radio's crackle came through my headset, and Ben, the security officer, said he was 10 minutes out because he was finishing an incident by the pool gate. I felt my pulse speed. The man called Carter heard the faint click of my headset and said in a softer voice, "Look, I do not want trouble. I will just wait." He opened his backpack a little to show a spiral notebook with a school logo sticker on it and a package shaped like a textbook. It had a sticky label with a printed code like a delivery tracking number. He said, "See, delivery confirmed. I am in the system." I wanted to check the label. When I reached for it, he pulled the pack closer, and the corner of it brushed my wrist. His touch was light, but it made the hairs on my arms stand up. I tried a polite route first. "I need to verify with Miss Garcia in the science department. She handles after-hour projects sometimes." He paused and named an Ms. Garcia, then named a class period I recognized. I called the science office extension and the voicemail was full. I texted Miss Garcia and got a read receipt but no reply. I looked at the scanner log and the most recent temporary badge had expired 2 weeks earlier. The sticker on the package had a code that, when I typed it into the tracking app on my computer, returned a delivery attempt to a different zip code and a note that the courier marked the recipient as unknown. My mouth went dry. "You cannot wait in the corridor," I said, and tried to keep my voice steady. "Campus security will be here. We have to clear the building." He gave me a gentle smile and said, "I know how these rules are. Can we just step into the library? It is colder in here and I left something in the study, Carl." That line tugged at something in me, a sense that he had prepared responses for every small objection. This was the first real escalation. The corridor closed in, the ventilation made a low drone, and my phone lost 1 bar of service for a moment. I remember the tactile feeling of the laminated visitor log under my hands and the ink from the pen that had trapped coffee on its tip. The sound of his sneakers against the floor was low, but it was a pattern I tracked like a drummer counts tempo. I told him again, "Please wait, do not go into the library alone."
He shrugged and said, "You do not trust me?" It was a simple sentence, but it landed like a weight. After that, he moved faster, crossing the corridor toward the library doors with the ease of someone who had rehearsed how to be dismissed. I stood up, blocking his path. "I am asking you to stop," I said.
He stepped to the side, keeping his body angled as if already thinking of a route to skirt me. A teacher named Priya walked by with a stack of papers and did not look twice. Other students passed like fish, their voices a muffled current. I felt my breathing grow shallow and my hands started to slightly tremble. I chose a more direct tactic and said, "If you are associated with a group project, you need to show me a school email or a teacher ID right now." He met my eyes and his pupils were steady. "I have it," he said. "I have the confirmation on my phone." He produced a smartphone and the screen glow made the corridor look suddenly brighter. The message was short, a screenshot of an email header with a school crest and a code. I squinted and tried to verify the sender address, and it looked legitimate at first glance. But the domain had a tiny typo, and the timestamp was 3 minutes earlier than my computer. It was not proof enough. I told him that the badge must be stamped and that the registrar had to sign off. He smiled again and reached for the desk to steady himself. "You are making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "You are the one on duty. You know how it goes. Everyone is tired." The voice had a persuasive cadence that leaked into the edges of my resolve. At that point, the first major complication arrived. Jamal, a senior who helped me with evening library shifts, opened the library door and said, "Alex, is everything okay?" He looked at the man and frowned. "I do not recognize him," Jamal said. The man answered, "I am part of Ms. Garcia's lab team. My name is Carter." Jamal crossed his arms and asked him one question that I had not thought of. "Where did you get that package? We did not have a delivery for tonight." The man frozen for a beat, and then his smile faltered. He stammered that a courier had left it at the main gate and that he had been told to come inside. Jamal moved to the desk and asked a second clear question. "What is your student number?" The man hesitated, flipping his notebook open to a scribble that looked like a student number, but it did not match any format we used. "Why are you making this so complicated?" he snapped, a brittle edge entering his tone. The air around us suddenly felt colder. The fluorescent lights hummed loud enough that I could hear a faint electrical buzz in my ears. I felt the first real spike of fear. The man stepped back as if shoved by an unseen force, and his hand dipped into his backpack. I said, "Do not pull anything out of that bag." He looked at me with what I can only describe now as a blank auditioned irritability. "I will leave," he said. He should have left. Instead, he crossed his arms and said, "Or you can run this by someone. This is a waste of time." He tried to pivot toward the stairwell and Jamal moved to block him. A crowd started to gather. Priya watched from 3 steps back, Maria, the principal, walked around the corner pushing the door open, and Ben, the security officer, finally arrived with his flashlight turned on, the beam steady and familiar. The man looked at Ben and his demeanor shifted for a second into a calculating softness. "I was told campus security could process me," he said. Ben, who had 20 years of experience, asked him to empty his pockets. The man complied slowly and produced a small plastic package sealed with a shipping label, a wrist bracelet like the ones used for school events, and a folded paper card with a stamped code. The bracelet had a school print on it, but the stamp looked like it had been photocopied. Ben asked him for ID. He handed a worn photo ID that had a face, but the name did not match anything we had. The first real confrontation had now become a cluster of questions aimed at the man who claimed to be a student. Voices layered, unintended sounds like a slam of a locker, the clack of keys jingling from Ben's belt, and the distant squeal of a tennis shoe on the gym floor. The man grew visibly agitated. He raised his voice and said, "I have rights to be here. I was invited." Ben said, "You are creating a scene. Either you calm down and let us verify, or we will escort you out." The man barked, "I do not want to be escorted out." He took a step toward Jamal, and Jamal stepped back, raising his hands in a de-escalating gesture. The man reached into his backpack again, and Jamal shouted, "Stop!"
I remember thinking, I cannot let him pull anything out. The air smelled faintly of rubber and a chemical like a dry cleaning solvent. I moved in front of the desk, trying to physically create distance. He looked at me with something dark behind his eyes and said, "You will regret this." It was the clearest threat I had ever been given in that building, and for the first time, I felt real physical danger. That threat triggered a cascade of procedural responses. Ben called for backup on his radio, and I dialed 911 with hands that had become clumsy with adrenaline. I told the dispatcher we had a non-compliant person refusing to leave who claimed enrollment but had fraudulent documents, and I gave the school address, the corridor, and details about potential weapons in the backpack. The dispatcher asked me to secure the area and keep students away. I directed Priya to escort the freshmen out through the side exit and asked Maria to lock the internal door to the admin wing. The small interventions felt like
flimsy barriers against the instability of the man in the hoodie. He watched the movements and said in a low voice, "You are all overreacting." He reached again into his bag, and this time his hand came out with an object wrapped in a cloth. Jamal lunged as if to grab it, and Ben shouted, "Stop or we will use restraints." The man reacted by slamming the cloth package against the countertop, as if forcing a reveal. Inside was a thin roll of zip ties, a cheap digital camera, and a small carved wooden box with a bracelet inside that had the school stamp. He held the box like proving a point. For reasons I could not explain at the moment, that small wooden box felt like the central object of the whole scene, like a key to the narrative he had prepared. In the resulting dialogue, there were sharp volleys from each adult present, and the man answered with rehearsed counter-questions. He said, "I was told to collect this for Mrs. Alvarez. She needed it for the history fair. She left it at the gate." Priya said, "Mrs. Alvarez left nothing at the gate. She is at home grading papers for the AP test." The man insisted, "You are lying." Ben said, "We need to verify. Step away from the desk." I said, "If you do not step back, I will have to detain you until police arrive." He stared at me, and in that stare I saw a readiness to escalate. He grabbed the camera and shoved it into Jamal's face and said, "You do not know what this is." Jamal backed up, and the camera clattered to the floor. The sudden harsh sound of plastic on tile made everyone flinch. For a moment I thought the situation would burst into physical violence. Then a different sound arrived, high and urgent, the 3 tones of a security alarm triggered by the main office panic system. It was as if that shrill mechanical sound rewired people's responses. The man flinched and for 2 seconds looked uncertain. That pause was everything. The first escape attempt happened when he bolted toward the stairwell, with Ben only a step behind. I ran toward the door to block his path, and I heard his breath loud and ragged. He ducked past the stair banister and threw a shoulder that clipped my ribs. The impact was brief and startling, and I tasted copper in my mouth. He moved down the narrow stairwell, which smelled of wet concrete and old paint. The echo of his footsteps like drummers in a tunnel. Ben yelled for him to stop and grabbed his sleeve. They wrestled on the landing, benches scraping tile, a backpack tumbling. I remember the tactile sensation of the dust on the rail and how my palm left a dry print. The man kicked free, sprinted across the parking lot and toward the side gate where a delivery van was idling with its hazard lights on. The van had no company logo, just a set of scuffed numbers on the door. He dove into the van and it peeled away with a squeal of tires. I ran to the gate as it closed and felt the finality of it like a shutter slamming. The police arrived 5 minutes after the van disappeared. Officer Diaz from the local precinct took statements and wrote a police report. He asked for detailed accounts for the stamped bracelet and the wooden box, for the delivery code and the sticker label on the package. He photographed the scene and logged the items into evidence with a calm thoroughness that cut through the adrenaline. I remember the policeman's voice, methodical, asking me to describe the man's gait, the tone in his voice, and any distinguishing marks. I could not keep my sentences short. The memory of his threat kept surfacing. After he left, the first wave of shock settled into a more complicated chest tightness, the kind that lands and refuses to leave. The aftermath required a series of practical steps and decisions that reshaped how I saw my role. Maria, the principal, convened a staff meeting at 9 p.m. and we reviewed the building's security protocols. She asked Ben why the side gate had not been locked, and he explained the patrol log had a hole in coverage that night because of an unrelated call at the sports complex. Priya volunteered to help rework our badge stamping procedure. Jamal insisted we check the delivery logs for the courier company and found an odd pattern of packages with similar stickers that had been reported in neighboring districts as false deliveries. We filed a formal police report and the incident was entered into the school safety database. Officer Diaz explained the next steps, including a request for surveillance footage, a forensic analysis of the paper labels and the wooden box, and an attempt to trace the van through the municipal traffic cameras. The technical description he gave bothered me because it compressed the uncertainty we felt into bullet points. He said, "We will request footage from the camera network, cross-reference the plate with state records, and check for any matching incident reports. Forensic processing will include fingerprint sweeps of the box and testing the adhesive of the shipping label. That will take 24 to 72 hours to process." That procedural explanation accounted for the practical next steps, but did not lessen the tightness in my chest. In the days that followed, the school community reacted in ways both predictable and unexpected. Some students joked nervously about a new mystery student meme that circulated in group chats. Others were shaken and avoided the library corridors at evening. Maria posted a notice about tightened visitor procedures and added a stamp code that required 2 staff signatures for after-hours pickups. Priya came to the desk and placed a small laminated card that read, "If in doubt, call 911," next to the pen. Ben asked me if I wanted to take time off, and I said no at first, then changed my mind the next day and took a day to sleep. I could not shake the memory of his eyes and the way his voice turned when his plan seemed threatened. I started sleeping with the front door locked at home. I found myself replaying the corridor scene in my head, each replay adding small details. The weight of the wooden box, the way the bracelet caught the light, the exact phrasing of his threat. Those rewinds were exhausting. I want to pause here and ask something of you. If you ever encountered someone who did not belong in a school or a dorm and you had a strange feeling about them, please share your experience below. Begin your comment with the phrase "suspicious student" and say where it happened, school office, dorm, community center, and what made you uneasy. Your comment can help others recognize patterns and may make a difference. I read every story, and I find that small details often reveal larger schemes. Thank you for sharing in advance. The investigation revealed surprising layers. Officer Diaz returned a week later with partial plate matches and a lead that connected the van to a courier network used by flea markets and pop-up vendors. Forensic work on the wooden box revealed no fingerprints, but did find traces of a blue ink stamp that matched a high-quality counterfeit of our school event bracelets. The sticky adhesive on the shipping label had a chemical profile that suggested it had been applied by hand with a common office tape. And the label itself had a tracking number that had been recycled from a legitimately delivered package 2 months earlier. We learned that groups were using the label trick to create a sense of legitimacy and to get past cautious staff. The police explained that their pattern analysis indicated a likely ring rather than a solitary actor, and that similar incidents had been reported at community centers and private schools across the county. Their explanation felt clinical, a map of methods that tried to contain the emotional residue into categories. I had to tell the story to a larger audience at a faculty meeting, and I remember how my voice shook. I recounted the sensory details to emphasize the importance of small cues. "He smelled like cigarette menthol," I told them. The wooden box had a rough grain smell of old varnish. The corridor sounded hollow, and his sneakers made no scuff marks, just soft taps. I listed the broken procedures: the gate unlocked, the temporary badge process that did not require 2 signatures, the lack of a live check on the courier ID. I suggested concrete changes: enforce 2 staff checks for after-hours pickups, require courier verification with a central dispatch number, install a better scanner that reads official QR codes and not just a printed tag. Maria agreed to implement the changes and asked Ben to create an updated protocol manual. A month after the incident, I still woke up sometimes with my heart racing. The wooden box had been logged into police evidence and later returned to the school as a non-criminal item because there was no conclusive proof linking it to stolen property. I kept a photograph of it on my phone and looked at it often like a talisman. The first month was a mix of procedural rewrites and personal recalibration. I started carrying a small backup flashlight in my pocket and practice, in my head, the sequence of steps I would take if someone tried again. I avoided the stairwell where he had run and asked Ben to change the patrol timing. I stayed closer to Jamal and Priya on evening shifts. Outside my apartment window, I started walking the block at night with a friend named Elena who lived across the street and who would text me when she came home late. She offered to pick me up after late classes sometimes. My sleep improved slightly, but I counted the days and noticed an added line of caution in everything I did. 3 months later, the police had identified a suspect believed to be the same person using license plate traces and a witness statement from a gas station camera. The county prosecutor opened an attempt to press charges because of repeated similar incidents in other districts and because the man had been linked to a network that targeted schools. Our school received a notice that the suspect had prior complaints for impersonation and for non-violent trespassing at community sites. That update gave a strange mixture of relief and a renewed anxiety. We installed a higher resolution camera in the main corridor and linked the feed directly to the local precinct. Maria arranged an informational assembly for staff and students where Officer Diaz explained the importance of verifying courier codes and never letting someone into a locked area without a staff escort. We added a small sticker on our official courier stickers that changed daily and could not be easily replicated. I volunteered to lead a short training session on recognizing social engineering tactics for new volunteers. Standing in front of my colleagues, I felt the familiar tremor in my hands, but I also felt a stronger steadiness. 6 months after the event, a court hearing produced an outcome that was both small and significant. The suspect was arrested after an unrelated traffic stop discovered the van loaded with counterfeit event bracelets and multiple bags with shipping labels that contained identical anomalies. The prosecutor had enough to charge him with attempted trespass and conspiracy related to the impersonation scheme in some cases. He did not get a long sentence, but the arrest and the publicity led to a series of advisories for schools and community centers in our region. For us, the visible change was more than the legal result. Students who had previously shrugged now asked how to verify deliveries. Faculty who had once accepted a single signature now required 2 staff certifications. The night shifts got a modest pay raise and a new camera system. For me personally, 6 months later, I had moved from the front desk to a role helping implement safer badge protocols. I was still taking night classes, but no longer felt like the only person who noticed small details. In the months that followed, the psychological aftermath shifted from sharp spikes to a low background hum. I started to notice how much my awareness had changed. I would walk into a staff room and take an extra beat to look at the badge lanyards people wore. I became sensitive to the smell of used coffee and cigarette residue on someone's sweater. My reactions felt both protective and exhausting at times. I also realized how much trust was needed to operate a school, and how easily that trust could be gamed. I kept copies of our updated procedures, and sometimes, when my hands were steady, I rewrote sections to make the language clearer for substitutes and volunteers. I maintained contact with Jamal and Priya, and we would debrief after late shifts to make sure no details slipped between us. There are concrete lessons I took away, and practical steps I still recommend. Always verify couriers through an official central dispatch number rather than trusting a printed label. Require 2 staff signatures for after-hours pickups, with verification of the teacher request in the school's email system. Keep the side gates locked and have patrol times logged and audited. If someone claims to be a student but cannot produce a verifiable student ID or a school email, do not let them into restricted areas. Install tamper-proof stickers and change verification codes daily to prevent recycling of labels. When police conduct forensic work, ask about the expected timeline for fingerprint and adhesive analysis and get a case number to follow up. Those steps are precise and practical, and they can reduce the vulnerability that social engineering exploits. Looking back, the night he came into our building was a turning point. I left that building with a new definition of vigilance and with a small tightened place in my chest where trust used to live loosely. I changed some routines, I kept certain scars. The wooden box is in a small cabinet in my office now, a reminder not of triumph, but of a lesson learned in the hollow of a corridor. I also found community in the aftermath. Colleagues who had once been distant offered support and shared their own near misses. The school became more deliberate. That does not eliminate risk, but it reduces the chance that someone who is not enrolled can walk in and make you doubt your own instincts. If you found this story meaningful, please do two things. First, share in the comments starting with "suspicious student," followed by
your location and the small detail that tipped you off. Those entries help other readers see patterns. Second, if you are new here, consider subscribing for more accounts like this that blend lived experience with practical safety tips. I will keep telling these stories not to alarm, but to inform and to remind us that small procedures and collective attention can change outcomes. Thank you for listening and for being a part of a community that protects its schools now more deliberately than before.